Ooh, that was a smooth transition. Pulled that one off nicely. Welcome, chat. Welcome. How are you today? I'm cutthemike. I'm here today with a little bit of a new look on the stream. Spent some time changing it up. See how it goes. Maybe we'll change it up some more. Who knows? But yeah. Spent some time making some scenes for campaign comrades, which check out, hang around, wait for our release of that. Yeah, so I had class yesterday. Very interesting 2 courses I'm taking. One called Race Law and the Public Intellectual. And so it's like a CRT class, but focusing on a lawyer's ability or platform to write op-eds, publish op-eds, and either provide a novel idea to the discourse or just to distill some sort of legal information. So I will be doing a lot of writing for that course. At least 3 pieces. So check out the Substack for that because I will post them there. Good way of forcing me to write for the Substack. And for another course I'm taking, which you'll see me doing some kind of like outside, research and getting understanding for the subject matter. Today, it's on law of the platform economy. So I'll also be writing a piece for that. Check out the Substack again for that one. That one will be probably the soonest. That will be the soonest that I need to. Honestly, I need to be like figuring out. Maybe I'll write something today. We'll see how the fucking stream goes. I got a lot of time today, so I'm gonna spend it with you, the internet. Yeah, and so what I'm going to try to do today, and we'll see how it goes, is kind of get through some homework, I guess, that I have, some readings that I need to do for class. Not necessarily readings, because I'm not necessarily gonna bore you with the reading. But understanding, at least understanding the concepts, and the subject matter for me. So I'm actually gonna start with the boring stuff first. And then trickle into affordable housing, and the platform economy. And so taking a course on affordable housing. I've only had one session of it so far. But what I'm going to be kind of doing here, and hopefully throughout the semester, do this, is kind of do some additional research or YouTube watching for some of these courses to kind of expand my background knowledge, commentate on it, provide some insight and analysis, work out my thoughts, and kind of distill some information on some hefty topics. So that's what I'm gonna try doing here today. See who joins. We'll throw some candy in throughout. Anyone who is strolling by and has some candy to drop by to lighten the mood, especially through the affordable housing section. Feel free. And I guess because I will be starting with the natural law theory portion. Hello, Lee. Welcome. So I was, speaking myself, but going over kind of what I'm gonna do today on the stream, and just kind of working through some stuff that I need to do for class, kind of getting some more background knowledge, and analyzing it. So on the docket today is affordable housing, natural law theory, and the platform economy. So I think I'm going to start with natural law theory first. Kind of give you a background of what my idea was, kind of like taking this course, and what I'm trying to get out of it, or like understand in this theory that's largely a right wing theory of the law, and kind of be able to break down their arguments, and find weak points or leverage in the arguments. So that's why I was taking the class. It's filled with philosophy grad students as well as lawyers, so it gets like very high level at some points, and I'm trying to bring it down to the practical. So today I will be looking at a debate that went on between these two theorists who were kind of like the fathers of their particular theories. One is H.L.A. Hart, who's a legal positivist. So that's kind of legal positivists are like Stephen Breyer's. It's a very liberal way of looking at the law. It's a very liberal theory of law. It's largely how law school is taught. Law school is taught in like a legal process theory, and especially when you have a more liberal professor, you're getting a legal positivist view or understanding of the law. The weird one. I mean, I'm mad at Joe for many reasons. So why in particular are you mad at him? So I'm gonna start kind of a refresher for me, and for a foundation of what we'll talk about. I'm just gonna go through kind of like the basis of natural law, um, and then of legal positivism. Um, I'm taking one right now, uh, and the like name of the course is Race Law and the Public Intellectual. So, um, we're gonna be talking to a lot of different writers, like critical race theory. Authors, writers are gonna be like guest speakers in the class. And like a large uh the goal of the class is to write a lot of op-eds, so I'll be like writing 3 different op-eds for that, which I'll publish to my Substack. um but yeah, so you know, get to read their works and question them on it, question them on their writing process and how they distill down a point, or an idea or a novel explanation for something, um, into like a 800 word piece, uh, that's digestible and readable by a general audience. Um, so it'll be interesting. Sorry, I gotta fix my chat here. There we go. Um, so yeah, so I'm taking natural law theory, kind of looking at a right wing or conservative theory of the law, um, the in contrast to typical like liberal interpretation of the law and legal positivism, and then taking a critical race theory class as well. So I will be like running the gambit of theories, and hopefully have a better understanding of all of them. But critical race theory, I have my master's in education as well, and um, critical race theory as the legal theory, is the first of critical race theory, and it then like bled into other disciplines, or the ideas from it into other disciplines, and one of them first to grasp it was education. So, a lot of my education degree was, um, you know, had that like critical race theory, analytical lens. And what critical race theory is largely a toolkit of interpreting and looking at the law, and it's very much just like any other critical theory. It's largely just a look at, a structural analysis, or systems analysis of uh what, and then adding that race is the the underlying like animus to that particular structure or system. Very coffee today. All right. So we're gonna look at natural law now. Um, so the first piece that we read for this course is a piece from the 90s, and it was about the misconception of natural law as a legal theory versus natural law as a moral theory. And it it's the period of time that it was written. And it's so this goes back to my other class, the critical race theory class. Like, part of the reason writing, it's a public intellectual class, and we're writing these op-eds is to like highlight the position that a lawyer has in, either distilling a work, or distilling a legal theory, a, a case, a law, whatever, uh, adding a new policy idea to the discourse, and having the platform and like the um, credentials, so to speak, of being legally trained, to be able to you know have some authority behind that voice. Um, but one of the so op-eds and legal writing in that way could very much be used to promote a good, but it very much can be manipulated, just like it is the media. It's manufactured consent, and it is openly used that way. You know, one, like, the media, like, the New York Times, for instance, will solicit people on certain issues. Um, they will also have people that have been paid to write something already by, some sort of interest group, or, you know, big money think tank. And then that person is submitting that work to the New York Times, uh, as another way of these interest groups lobbying, government officials and bureaucrats, administrators that are reading this, or you know, um, others that participate in the discourse. And law review articles are kind of used the same way, but within the legal field. So this first piece that we read was a law review article that came out in the 90s. So it's like right on the tail end, or the back of Clarence Thomas's nomination hearing. And the piece is, advocating, or going off about how this misconception of, or this confusion between natural law as a moral theory and a legal theory, is just that, a misconception. And the piece goes through why they differ, and that it's essentially just a bad faith argument to attack Republicans, who are more likely to hold both a natural law, moral, and legal theory. And so, natural law, this is the Wikipedia page. So, as we could read here, notions of an objective moral order external to human legal systems underlying natural law. What is right or wrong can vary according to the interest one is focused on. An unjust law is no law at all, is a poor guide to the... Okay. This is a bad example. All right, but so natural law theory is that there's an objective moral good that is not necessarily religious, just an objective moral good, that can be known and like discovered, And only laws that adhere to that moral good are legitimate laws. And so like a natural law theorist would say someone, a judge should judge a law according to natural law theory is a judge that is judging the law against some moral good, and that moral good is objective, and this is opposed to a moral good that is like rooted in the context of that particular period of time, or the conventions of that society, culture, etc. So that's opposed to legal positivism, which is the thesis that existence of the content of law depends on social facts and not on its merits. So like one of the big ideas behind legal positivism is that you can separate law and morality. And a law is something that is created based on the social facts and conventions of that time, and what makes a law good or just is the fact that it went through the process of becoming a law. And so like on first cut, having gone through the process of becoming a law is good, and then like is judged on the social facts of that time, whether that law still has merit, and that's how like a judge would determine it. So it says the positive thesis does not say that the law's merits are unintelligible, unimportant, or peripheral to the philosophy of law. It says that they do not determine whether laws or legal systems exist. Whether a society has a legal system depends on the presence of certain structures of government. All hail the process. The process is good, we swear. What's the from Rick and Morty? When they have the fucking headlords. God damn it! Now I have to find that. It's gonna be stuck in my head. Fuck! It's like on the tip of my tongue. From the "Show Me What You've Got" episode. Like when they're like releasing the prisoner, or like the truant, whatever. We'll come back to it. What up, Tony, dad of Quattro? Thank you for joining from Dan Simpson. We're talking about legal positivism and natural law theory and legal positivism, the conservative and like liberal theories of the law. Legal positivism is essentially all about the process, that the process is good. Everything goes through the process, comes out. It's gone through the marketplace of ideas. Yes, headward free now to rise. Thank you. That's it. Headward free now to rise. Headward free now to rise. Benny Box with the save. So back to legal positivism. It says whether a society has a legal system depends on the presence of certain structures of government, not on the extent to which it satisfies ideals of justice, democracy, or the rule of law. What laws are enforced in that system depends on what social standards its officials recognize as authoritative. For example, legislative enactments, judicial systems, social customs. The fact that a policy would be just, wise, efficient, or prudent is never sufficient reason for thinking that it is actually the law, and that the fact that it is unjust, unwise, inefficient, or imprudent is never sufficient reason for doubting it, because it went through the process. According to positivism, law is a matter of what has been posited, ordered, decided, practiced, tolerated, blah, blah, blah. So, that's what we're looking at. We're going to watch some other dude's video. A little boring, I have to say. We're going to watch this one. We're going to watch him on a fast speed. You know what? Fuck it. This is going to be too boring. Talked about natural law theory. I did. You see the big natural laws on that one? Oh, the big natural laws. The natural boobas. Okay. We're going to watch stuff about affordable housing. That's more interesting. So, we're watching some Vox and Vice. In their Vox and Vice, so that's all I'll say. So we'll critique it as we go, but they should provide some good information on some of the reasons why the policy decisions behind some of the obviously the reasons our suburbs are cookie cutters of fucking everything. Every town in America, every suburb is the fucking same. With the exception of the small town centers that have kind of lasted from pre, even the Civil War era. And we're just going to do some learning about affordable housing.
You ever feel like you're just going in circles? So this is Halsley, a still developing subdivision in Midlothian, Virginia. This place won the National Home Builders Award in 2017 for Best Master Planned Community, and there are a ton of cul-de-sacs. One,
Gotta love a
two,
cul-de-sac.
3, 4. Let's just go to the map, save some time.
Wow.
Cul-de-sacs are everywhere. They're a symbol of suburban sprawl, but they aren't an accident. They're physical evidence of how one federal agency shaped the suburbs in ways that we're still grappling with today. English suburban plans inspired early suburbs in the United States, like Radburn, New Jersey, which offered a unique plan. Founded in 1929, it was designed to be car-friendly, but it introduced a street that served more like an alleyway or service road. It was almost a prototype for the cul-de-sac. Cars traveled and parked in back of houses, not in front. People walked to and from the train via footpaths that were car-free. Though Radburn wasn't totally finished, today you can see the footpaths that still provide a pedestrian network for residents. But out of those ideas, it was Radburn's cul-de-sac, not its footpaths, that spread, thanks to an agency with the power to do it. In 1929, the Great Depression crushed the housing market. The bust dragged on for years.
A decline of 92% from 1928.
Sounds like something that may happen soon to us.
But due to the stimulation of the National Housing Act, 1935 presents a different picture.
Before 1934, mortgages required anywhere from 30 to 50% down, paid off as quickly as 5 years. The new Federal Housing Administration, or FHA, insured mortgages for lenders, shrinking down payments to 20% and extending the mortgage to the now standard 30 years. All that made home buying affordable and kicked off a housing boom for purchasing and construction.
This tidal wave of new construction is an important contribution to the economic rebuilding of America. Home ownership is the basis of a happy, contented family life.
I know you're probably like, how does any of this connect to cul-de-sacs or suburban design? The thing is that the FHA wanted to ensure that all these investments they were making were relatively safe investments.
They want to make sure that no black people were able to access them. That's how they were ensuring they were safe investments. Just spoiler alert.
So to do that, they ranked and rated neighborhoods and homes, and then they created guidelines for those ratings. And that is where things get complicated. Some FHA guidelines we'd see today is roughly positive, like minimum property requirements. Think minimum standards for plumbing and foundation of new houses to guarantee they weren't just junk. Mostly good. Except for the asbestos. Lots of asbestos. On the other end of the spectrum, the FHA explicitly...
Gotta love the asbestos and the fact that we gave legal immunity to anyone that used it prior to like 1955. So like all sorts of companies that used it for various different products from pre-1955 and then after they should have known in 1955, they got free reign, you know, and we're immune from liability. So yay, American legal system.
Explicitly endorsed segregation as a measure of housing quality, i.e. segregation equals good neighborhood. This underwriting manual puts it really clearly. If a neighborhood is to retain stability, it is necessary that properties shall continue to be occupied by the same social and racial classes. So these guidelines ran the gamut, from mundane to appalling. But developers would be taking a huge risk to ignore the FHA, since these loans sold houses. Somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, the FHA's recommendations also included city planning. They started with car-friendly minimum street widths and then expanded. In bulletins like Planning Profitable Neighborhoods, the FHA laid out ideal suburban plans, which were clearly labeled bad or good. They drew from models like Radburn, but focused on the car and left out the pedestrians. Grid plans were definitively bad. Other plans with curvilinear or winding roads were good. That included cul-de-sacs. This FHA-labeled bad plan shows why curved streets really did make sense sometimes. The dotted lines show topography, like hills. A grid plan would have required a ton of construction to work around the landscape. The good plan, a curvilinear one...
Oh no, they would have had to put more money towards infrastructure. Wah.
Reduces construction costs and is just nicer to look at. But these plans also insisted on a car-centered vision of the neighborhood, with cul-de-sacs designed to slow down vehicles and limit through traffic, while also guaranteeing that cars were necessary to get around.
Yeah, guaranteeing that no public transportation would ever reach these areas. No one could fucking walk anywhere. And some of these places, you can't even fit a sidewalk. I grew up in a suburban street that no sidewalk. None at all. And yeah, it was all fucking hills and shit. No sidewalk. I would walk to school or from school sometimes and like, you know, unless you want to walk on the major fucking, you know, it's essentially a fucking highway, a 40-mile-an-hour highway through the middle of my town, through the fucking like main cock vein of town. I would have to cut through people's backyards. I would cut through tons of people's backyards to fucking walk home. And because nowhere had fucking sidewalks. The main road had sidewalks, and some streets just barely adjacent, or, you know, just adjacent to it. But beyond that, once you got off that fucking the main arteries, all the capillaries had fucking nothing.
This bad plan would have worked well for public transportation and city services, or a walking commute, but developers couldn't risk bad plans. The good plan was the only safe option if they wanted their houses to sell. Plans drafted the bad way were revised to fit the FHA's vision of the good life. That was a combination of financial coercion and a quickly evolving sense of what a suburb should be.
All white is what they mean, what they think the suburb should be, and developed by one single firm.
Listen, I played kickball in cul-de-sacs. They have a lot of advantages. They really do slow down.
It blows my mind, because we'll touch on this later as well. It blows my mind that capitalist hogs obviously, getting their slop from the fucking, the shepherds, I'm gonna call them, of the fucking right-wing grifters. That socialism is going to be the thing that brings about like uniformity, brings about the sheeple, that's going to take away our freedoms, when our laws have systemically favored larger firms that bring uniformity, and thus, like, in the mind, the neoclassical economic mind, like uniformity and stability, and like that uniformity shows that they bested the competition. Why we'll touch on later, like these platform economies that these platforms that have helped to build this, platform economy that is very different from the neoliberal conception or neoclassical conception of how our economics work. Even the platform economy's like predecessor, in some like trucking industries and taxi industries, in the 70s, the law systemically favors large firms. That, firms that could do things in mass at the most efficient cost, or the most efficient cost being or efficiency being a monetary cost. So why you get these developers, and the law and the policies structured around those laws favor those large developers that are going to come in one fell swoop, provide the most efficient cost saving, housing. And then they just plug that into their kind of cultural views, and wanting to create these like bastions of whiteness in the suburbs, and provide all the new development to white privileged people, rather than the perceived other, and the urban black man that they were trying to leave behind.
Through traffic, they create a sense of community. They just have a lot of things going for them. And this subdivision here,
also, if you're privileging cars, think of who could own the cars. Who owned cars at that point? Who could afford them? You know, these laws are here's a critical race theory analysis of the law, is that it's structurally created to privilege the white man, and here the law has been structurally created, and the policy decisions, you know, buttressing the law, have been to further promote those who already have white privilege, and who are already at the top of the class, and then continue to push down those at the bottom.
It doesn't have much to do with those outmoded FHA guidelines, but it does exist in a culture that those guidelines created. The cul-de-sac, it crowded out a million other good ideas. Ideas that could have had a different vision of the suburbs. Ideas that weren't all about this. Today, some suburbs are changing the plan. There's even a way to make existing cul-de-sacs more walkable. But it's a little strange that so many places are still beholden to the old FHA's vision of the one good life. This is a proposed black subdivision near Atlanta from a 1948 FHA plan. The plan included a planting strip to serve as a visible boundary between white and black neighborhoods. In the same plan, the FHA plotted very elegant curvilinear streets and cul-de-sacs.
The YouTube lag is...
That's it for this episode about the
huge.
suburbs. Let's read some
Ben, if
comments
you're
from the
still
last
around.
episode, which was about Manhattan's grid. These people...
We're done with that one. Oop. All right. So that was just talking about some of the segregation from the FHA, the how they privileged cul-de-sac development in the suburbs, and this newer Vox article is gonna, I guess, go Vox article, Vox video, delve more into affordable homes that were made systemically illegal.
So I spend a lot of time looking at houses on Zillow. And lately I noticed that even Zillow.
I'm sorry. Clean your keyboard off if you're going to be filming your keyboard. That's a greasy ass keyboard. Look at that. Look how fucking greasy that thing is. That space bar. You got some like dirt in there? Clean that shit out. Come on. Come on, Jack.
Houses on Zillow. And lately I noticed that even in places where houses are usually expensive, they seem even more expensive. Like here in the San Francisco Bay Area.
What has the last year been like?
It's shocking. Buyers are paying 15 to 20% above asking price now. I had a listing in South San Francisco, 32 offers, 31 very unhappy buyers.
For years, the Bay Area has been an extreme...
Many of the houses out in California, if you're not going over asking price by like 100, 200,000, you're getting fucking poo-pooed.
Example of how difficult it is to find affordable housing in the US. It's where Silicon Valley bus drivers sleep in their cars at night because they can't afford housing near work, and where school teachers can't afford to live in the counties they teach. But it's not just the Bay Area. The lack of affordable housing is a national problem, and right now it's worse than ever.
We've seen over the last year housing prices reach a level that they've never reached before in American history. They kind of just look like a rocket ship, going to the moon. Housing prices reaching a median of $300.
Dogecoin to the moon.
$50,000 for the median American home.
Those prices have made
I
rent
wonder if that was like a silent endorsement for the stonks by Jerusalem.
more expensive and have made homeownership less attainable for millions of Americans. So, why is this happening? And how do we bring that rocket ship closer to Earth? We can think of today's housing prices in terms of a supply and demand problem. On the demand side, there are a few things happening. The first is a generational shift in who's buying homes.
Millennials are the biggest generation in American history.
One point on the supply demand issue. Taking it as like facts and reality is there are more houses than there are people. It's not a supply of buildings, that we have a lack of. And as like a normative assumption that housing and the building of housing should be subject to, the free market competition or like supply and demand metrics of, neoclassical economics is absurd and just dangerous to a population, and continues to show how capitalism, will kill, fucking kill everyone. You're expendable under capitalism. Because if you can't survive in the market, then you don't get to survive. If you can't survive in the market to be able to afford a house when we keep moving the goalpost, or keep making different policy decisions and creating laws that keep you as a class or race down, if you can't survive in that, you don't get to survive. So again, the fact that housing is subject to supply and demand metrics is, on its face absurd.
And they're aging into their prime home buying years.
On top of that, mortgage rates are at an all-time low, which means it's very cheap to borrow the money needed to buy a house. That's enticed more people to buy if they can, making demand for houses even higher. The problem is that supply isn't matching that demand. From 2010 to 2019, there were fewer homes built in the US than in any decade since the 1960s.
But part of the issue that Vox doesn't highlight here is, you're looking at new residential construction and homes on the market, and that does not give you an accurate picture of the homes that are unoccupied throughout the country. When, most of those homes, especially out in California, are owned by investment bankers or whatever, fucking finance bro guys. The distinction between them, hedge fund, whatever, for this purpose doesn't fucking matter. Just the fucking like big finance people that are buying up houses as investments and sitting on them for when the market is ripe for them to sell, not capturing that, and then saying that the supply is down. Yes, the supply on the actual market is down, but the number of structures that could house people, far exceeds the demand.
In particular, the construction of smaller, entry-level housing, the kind made for first-time home buyers, has dropped dramatically. In the 1980s, those starter homes made up around 40% of all homes built. Today, it's closer to 7%. In 2018, one estimate said the U.S. housing market was 2.
So, and I guess that's addressing a homelessness problem rather than an affordable housing problem, because, what I guess I'm saying is we have the ability to house people, but again, that's not accounting for all the people renting that should be able to afford a home and have access to it if they so please.
0.5 million homes short of meeting demand. By the end of 2020, it was 3.8 million.
And that's driving a big part of the problem, both for renters and for people who want to be homeowners.
The shortage is worst in the places where demand is highest, near good jobs, transit, and schools. And one pretty straightforward solution to that is to just build more homes in those places. But for years, there's been one big obstacle to that. We aren't allowed to. Take a look at this map of the Bay Area. It's showing something called zoning, or local regulations that decide what can be built where. This much of the region is zoned for residential housing. In blue are areas zoned to allow multifamily housing, while the areas shaded in pink are zoned for single-family housing only. That's 82% of all residential land in the Bay Area.
What it means is that you've banned the ability for anyone to build anything other than a single unit of housing on that lot of land.
And in many towns, like Atherton, they've excluded all multifamily housing from their neighborhoods.
And that doesn't just mean a giant apartment building. It means things like duplexes, things like, fourplexes, things like that are illegal in the majority of the country.
This is an example of something called exclusionary zoning. It's a big part of the reason for the housing supply shortage in the US. And single-family only zoning is just one way local laws limit how much housing we can build. Many places also employ height restrictions. In Cupertino, California, some areas are zoned for multifamily buildings, but they don't allow any buildings over 2 stories. Parking requirements are often written into zoning laws too. Cupertino requires developers to set aside space for 2 parking spaces for each unit of multifamily housing. That means if you were building an apartment complex that had 100 units, you'd need to find space for 200 parking spots, which usually means buildings that size don't get built at all.
They lower the number of units they're actually building so they can save space for those parking.
Parking sucks in just about every city. I mean, we also have cars that are just, at times, unnecessary. If we had public transportation, it'd be so much better. But just also, I'm in New York City, and what I can't stand is people that have unnecessarily big trucks that park like fucking assholes and take up like 3 spots, or like, park not far enough off like the curb or like whatever is stopping, the end portion of the parking, and park so like no one else could fit there, but then and there's like a hydrant in front, so no one else could park in front, so he just takes up like fucking 3 spots. I think that we should just have license to key those cars. Also, cop cars that park in bike lanes, keyed. Yeah, and the towing, exactly. They got the fucking huge ass mirrors. Yeah, you should be able to key those. No repercussions.
Spaces. And then those units become more expensive because the land still stays the same cost to the developer. And you then get a situation where potentially more affordable units turn into higher income servicing units.
Another feature of many zoning laws is minimum lot sizes. It means builders are legally required to allot a minimum amount of land for each home, often a large amount of land. In Cupertino, most single-family lots must be at least 5,000 square feet each.
Starter homes are usually around 1,400 to 1,500 square feet, and so you've basically banned all that type of housing.
In Atherton, the minimum lot size for homes is 1 acre, more than 43,000 square feet, which makes it virtually impossible to build any kind of affordable home there. Together, exclusionary zoning laws.
An acre is huge to have as a minimum. I grew up in a suburb where like half an acre was pretty much the norm in all the like immediate post-war. I grew up in a house that was like a 1950 development. They were all like ranches that looked the same. And they were all half-acre plots. And a single acre for a house is huge. Even the half-acre was, you know, at some point too big. You know, with the house the size that we had, a quarter acre to like a third of an acre would be, you know, more than sufficient. Though my dad has now moved, and, you know, if he had his way, he'd live in Montana on like a, 500 acre plot and only be friends with bears. So there's that. But an acre is a huge, huge minimum. And what sucks in America too is like just thinking about this one policy decision to make, in this town, and then multiply this by the however many towns that have, a 1 acre plot minimum or higher, even half acre plot minimum. Especially with the newer developments, the plot of land around the house is going to look exactly like Fox has it pictured here. Are you not capturing my mouse? Oh my god. I changed all my shit. Capture cursor. Yeah, it should be capturing it. Whatever. In the 1 acre plot here, all that shit's going to be grass. They're going to clear out all the trees, and then it's literally going to be grass like this, maybe with a fucking sprinkler system that's just going to fucking suck water, because grass takes up an unreal amount of water to keep it the green that we American chuds so love. So from this one policy decision of making it an acre plot, all the indirect consequences. Now you're going to be wasting more water on each of those plots, because, people are going to want to keep up the aesthetics, especially if that, this a white neighborhood that has like a certain, it may not have a homeowners association, but, there's a Karen that walks around and makes sure that everyone is in line and, agrees with the silent societal like norm of that neighborhood, and not having making sure that their grass is green and not fucking brown.
Laws like this push builders across the country to focus on bigger luxury.
So my point is just you're exacerbating all these different consequences from one policy decision.
Homes instead of small.
And one policy decision amongst many that are set to privilege, a white, affluent class.
Smaller starter homes or multifamily housing.
Essentially creating gated communities in public spaces. What you are saying is that you are only allowing people who have already been able to partake in the wealth of this country and to grow their income and have access to high opportunity jobs and education to live in our neighborhoods.
Historically, some of the first zoning laws in the US were engineered for that exactly, to block people of color, and in particular Black Americans, from living in predominantly white neighborhoods. Today, the laws don't explicitly mention race, but they continue to worsen segregation. In the Bay Area, the more single-family zoning in a neighborhood, the wider it is. But all this has another effect as well. By shrinking the pot of new housing getting built, while demand keeps rising, it drives up the cost of housing for everyone. Changing zoning laws can be difficult, and often the biggest obstacles are the wealthiest residents.
The process is usually defined by who shows up to these public meetings, and what you have is often a much whiter, wealthier crowd, the ones who come and say, I don't want this in my community, I'm concerned about what will happen to my property.
NIMBYs is the word for this, not in my backyard.
Values, and then there's this kind of code word, neighborhood character.
Remember those teachers I mentioned who can't afford to live in the counties where they teach? Well, in 2018, one local school district proposed a solution, building affordable housing units for teachers in San Jose. It caused an uproar among San Jose parents, who petitioned against changing the neighborhood. It may not seem like a big deal when one wealthy neighborhood blocks one multifamily development. The problem is that it happens all the time. Communities block new housing everywhere.
People are, when they hear this kind of rhetoric, very confused because they're like, why I don't want to live in a place with 10,000 apartment buildings. It doesn't even make sense to do that. And they're right. No one is saying that there should be every neighborhood in every city should be, 10,000 foot apartment buildings or anything like that.
But even small, gradual changes to zoning laws can have an impact. For example, allowing smaller homes on smaller lots, or simply allowing duplexes, would double capacity for housing in some areas. In recent years, some cities like Berkeley, Minneapolis, and Portland have taken the huge step of ending single-family zoning. But the problem is nationwide.
The real fix is going to happen when these decisions start being made and start being regulated at the statewide level or at the federal level in some capacity.
Today, the Biden administration...
It would be fantastic if we had some central planning.
Is attempting to tackle exclusionary zoning through a $5 billion program that would give money to localities that remove exclusionary zoning policies. But even that may not be enough.
This is more than any presidential administration has done on this topic, either Democrat or Republican. It is also very small in the face of this problem. They want to take action, they recognize how big of a deal it is, but they are not actually willing to create the kind of political blowback from often very high-value voters living in suburban environments.
Ending America's housing shortage will require real political willpower, and it'll require people across the country to take a look at their own neighborhoods. What gets...
All right. Done. Next. All right. So, full disclosure, if you're a Hasanabi viewer, you may have seen these. I was catching them in and out. I'm rewatching them because it fits into my class, and this has been very helpful to kind of think through some of my ideas, some of my I guess talking points, and kind of just like solidify my thoughts on the issue. So thank you to those who have been lurking or just have me in the background. Appreciate it.
There's a similar pattern you'll see in the skyline of cities all over the
Why are you
US
so
and
quiet?
Canada. The city is sprawling and flat, and then suddenly, a bunch of giant towers. Here it is in Minneapolis, and in Charlotte, and in Seattle. But compare that to almost any European city, and you'll get a much smoother progression of buildings with lots that are of an in-between size. When I criticize American car-dependent suburbs, there's a common knee-jerk reaction. Someone will inevitably claim, I live in the suburbs because I don't want to be crammed into a concrete box in the sky, as if there's no alternative between a concrete tower and car-dependent suburbia with asphalt as far as the eye can see.
Sorry, those aren't concrete towers. Those are steel, baby.
Now, you might just dismiss this person as being an ignorant
Steel and
idiot.
glass.
To be fair, they probably are. But there's a small bit of reality in that statement, because in most of the US and much of Canada, those are your only two options to live: an apartment or a single-family home. There's almost nothing in between. Urban planners have dubbed this the missing middle problem, and it affects almost every city in the US and Canada with very, very few exceptions. As with most things wrong with urban planning in America, this all started in the 1940s when cities started promoting car-centric suburbanization with an emphasis on every family owning their own detached home. Now, if single-family homes were built because people wanted single-family homes and the market demanded it, that might be okay, but it's not that simple. Instead, it became almost impossible to build anything other than single-family homes because of strict Euclidean zoning. I've referred to this before in my Livable Neighborhoods video. And zoning is not the only problem either. There are other car-centric policies, especially minimum parking requirements, that reinforce this as well. All of these requirements severely constrain what can be built. In particular, it makes it almost impossible to build the traditional walkable neighborhoods that are enjoyable, efficient, sustainable, and financially solvent. This problem is endemic across the US. If you look at areas of a US city where residential buildings are permitted, you find that almost all of it only allows for single-family homes. It's illegal to build anything else. The worst offender here is San Jose, where 94% of the land that allows building housing only permits building single-family homes. And this is in the heart of Silicon Valley, where more housing is desperately needed. Canadian cities are much better, but still far too high. Remember, what this means is that developers must build single-family homes in these areas, even if there's demand for something else. There's no other choice. This ultimately leads to a scarcity in residential land for any other type of building, and even then, nearby residents can object to almost any development, which means that every new development is going to be a fight. This is a major reason why developers build condo towers so often in the US and Canada, because getting zoning approval isn't cheap or easy, and fighting NIMBYs isn't cheap or easy either. So a developer is only going to put the effort into jumping through all of these hoops if they're sure they can make a profit in the end. That means making the absolute most of the scarce residential land, and ultimately that means cramming in as many residents as possible. Which is why you end up with this insane situation of the lowest density single-family homes next to giant high-rise towers in the most expensive city in Canada. But of course, it didn't used to be this way. Consider this street in Toronto built in the 1920s. Here you can see detached homes of various different sizes, like this cute blue house, or this small bungalow. There are also several terraced homes like these. And this looks like a single house, but it's actually several apartments in one building. But it still fits in very neatly into the neighborhood.
So there's like areas of New England that will have this type of housing. What's interesting about those areas is they typically have streets that you could walk, a little town center, you know, like an old downtown. And there's plenty of like quote unquote white neighborhoods that throughout New England that have this. And it's an interesting, model to have this like multifamily living in a walkable distance.
Then there's this very small apartment block too, and these small terraced homes that have clearly seen better days. And finally, at the end of the street, there's commercial buildings like this one within easy walking distance of residents, and apartments were built over most of the shops as well. Today, it is nearly impossible to find any place in the US or Canada where all of these different types of buildings would be legal to build on the same street, something that would be completely normal before the 1940s. But even if you could get the zoning variances to build this small multi-unit building, which you can't, the neighbors would absolutely lose their minds. We can't have people of marginally lower socioeconomic status in our neighborhood.
Could you imagine?
What if their skin color was different? Could you imagine? So instead, we get a 40-story condo tower down the street. The situation in Europe is very different. Here in the Netherlands, for example, you'll very often see mid-rise buildings that are 5 floors or less.
I love people that come in to like small streamer Twitch chats and just like drop shit like this. Biden on Thursday told Jewish leaders that he spent time at the Tree of Life synagogue after the 2018 mass shooting there, but the rabbi says he never visited. Like, bro, do you think I'm like a Biden stan? Think I'm out here simping for Biden? And you like come in, drop this, and it's like a ooh gotcha? I think Biden has done very few good things. It wasn't a good gotcha. Because I'm not a Biden stan, so it's not like, oh, fuck, you caught me. This dude that I worship is a liar. All my views on him are bad now. No, I don't fucking, like, okay, he's a fucking politician. Like, he's going to lie. It's literally what they do. And he's not a politician that I'm particularly fond of.
And many terraced homes as well. It is possible to find single-family homes too, of course, but it's not the only type of housing available. This street, in Dalvendrecht, an utterly normal
Thank
city
you.
near Amsterdam, has terraced homes mixed with semi-detached homes and small apartment buildings, all in
Did I just own you in the marketplace of ideas?
the same place. This provides so much more choice in the housing market, especially for families. Not everybody wants to maintain a big house with a big yard and live in a place where you have to drive to do just about anything. And it also allows for the type of enjoyable, livable, walkable urban neighborhoods that I'm constantly praising on this channel as being some of the best places in the world to live. You can even live in a concrete box in the sky, if you like that kind of thing. So maybe you don't like these kind of homes, and that's okay, they don't like you either. But even if you don't like these kind of homes, you have to justify why it is illegal to build these kind of homes in almost every neighborhood in the US and Canada.
Illegal be. Show your Biden shirt hat. Yeah, I don't got one. Sorry, bro. They're made illegal just based on policy choices of what the municipality thought was the most efficient use, and justify it by some bullshit reason that has the outcome of being racist and exclusionary to those that don't have the wealth to afford a single family home.
Now, of course, eliminating single-family zoning doesn't eliminate single-family homes. These houses can still be built if there's demand for it. It just means they would no longer be the only type of homes that can be built. Thankfully, some cities in North America are starting to make some progress with this issue.
Excuse me.
In 2019, Minneapolis abolished single-family zoning and now allows building duplexes and triplexes in any neighborhood in the city. Vancouver has recently made it possible to build duplexes in all residential neighborhoods, though not triplexes. And even better legislation means that Portland can once again build housing that used to be considered normal, such as...
Oh, I'm sure there's many Biden hats that exist. I'm sure there's a whole Etsy like market for it. Because I know there's a whole Etsy market for fucking Kamala Mamas and all their fucking shit. So I'm sure there's some Biden hats.
fourplexes and cottage courts, which are several small homes around a common yard. These cities are taking a good step forward, but they're still very much in the minority. And unfortunately, other regulations, such as setbacks, lot coverage rules, or minimum
Mamala. Yeah, that's what Kamala Mamala. Hey, DFKGF, why don't you throw me a follow if you've appreciated our discourse? Trying to get to 50.
and still make it difficult to build anything other than single-family homes. Also, even with these zoning changes, there are still far too many dense but livable housing options that are not permitted, such as courtyard buildings, townhouses, and small apartment buildings. Ultimately, if US and Canadian cities want to succeed, they're going to have to start
Nice, thank
undoing
you,
car-centric housing policy. And
DFKGF.
banning single-family zoning to make the missing middle legal again is a good first step. And then they can start to bring back the enjoyable, walkable neighborhoods they used to build without having to live in a concrete box in the sky. I'd like to
Okay.
thank...
We don't need to watch that. Boom, done with that one. All right. So, this is the start of a new series on Not Just Bikes, a story of the financial instability of the American and Canadian cities based on the research and media of strongtowns.org. Strongtowns is an American nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the resiliency and financial stability of American and Canadian cities. They support thousands of people across the United States and Canada who are advocating for a better way of thinking about the way we build our world. All right, let's see.
Nonprofit organization called Strongtowns.
Yo, oh, that's my fault.
They have produced a lot of great content online already, but I think their message is too important not to share with my audience on YouTube as well. If you have watched this channel before, you'll know that I've traveled all over the world and developed my own ideas about what makes a city great. Strong Towns is really interesting to me because they came to many of the same conclusions that I did, but from a totally different perspective. And they fundamentally changed the way I looked at cities, and especially city financing. I've learned over the years that when it comes to city design, the Netherlands does this better than almost any other country in the world. Nevertheless, I sometimes see Dutch people in the comments of my videos speaking enviously about the spacious roads and suburbs in the United States. To me, that makes this Strongtown series of videos important to my whole audience, as they have a lot to teach us about the problems with American-style city design. In this video, I'm going to talk...
Okay, I did address it at one point, saying that he's a liar because he's a politician. You know, and he's also a fucking old man that probably had a gaffe. It's a shitty one. Simply said his own words from the other day. Okay, what are you trying to get out of this comment and this back and forth?
A little bit about the history of strong towns and some of their core topics that will be discussed later in this.
Ooh. Chat, another thing. Dollar General, there's a great Intercept piece on how they're overvaluing their stock, or like their store as a way of getting cheaper loans. And so they're driving up the real estate prices in the surrounding areas, and there's fucking popping up all over the country like fucking rabbits.
Series. Strong Towns was started in 2008 by Charles Marone. He says his friends call him Chuck, so I guess I'll call him Charles. Charles worked as a civil engineer in Minnesota, and he noticed that the cities and towns he worked for were growing and building lots of roads and infrastructure that he helped to design. But somehow, these growing cities were also going deeper and deeper in debt every year. In short, they were building lots of roads and development projects, but still going broke. He discovered this wasn't just something that happened in his part of the country. Rather, towns and cities all over the United States, and in Canada too, were on a similar path of decline. And it all stemmed from the American pattern of city development that had started after the Second World War. Strong Towns calls this the suburban experiment, a method of development that is drastically different than any other in the history of cities. But I'll talk about that in more detail in a future video. As Charles started investigating further, it became clear that the American system of growth and development was fundamentally broken, and it has guaranteed the decline of American cities.
Sorry. I'm about to get into a Twitter war. Yeah, actually, not even worth my time. Little fucking dingus. All right. Cars left
Now,
versus
for me,
moderate. Dems
that's
go.
about where I
Guys
stopped.
have to get
Personally, I had
along.
moved
If
cities
not,
so many
you
times
guys
that
have
I
to
no
get
longer
along.
had
If
a
not,
home anymore.
if not, what?
So there was no incentive for me to stay in any one place and fight to make it better. Instead, my wife and I researched what we thought was the best place in the world for us to live and did everything we could to move there. Charles, on the other hand, was braver, more patriotic, and maybe crazier, depending on the way you look at it. He realized there were places in America that were not broken, places that had built wealth and prosperity and that could do it again. The downtowns, the main streets, the streetcar suburbs of the early 20th century. These were places that had good bones and could be built upon to rebuild American cities. Once you learn about strong towns, you'll start to understand why car-dependent suburbia can't continue. It's not a matter of preference or how people want to live. These places simply cannot sustain themselves. I believe that the material of strong towns is absolutely necessary to understanding how successful cities work. So as this channel progresses, I'm going to be slowly building a library of videos on the concepts presented in strong towns. Topics such as the growth Ponzi scheme, the idea that American suburbs are literally a Ponzi scheme, a development pattern that constantly needs more growth and often more debt in order to keep them solvent. Why American cities are broke. Why cities all over the US and Canada never seem to have enough money for roads, bridges, water mains, or in some cases, even basic city services. Traditional development. How is it that beat-up old downtowns like this one in my hometown actually generate more money for the city than the shiny big box stores on the periphery? The Strode, the most dangerous, inefficient, and financially reckless way to build a street. So in future videos, I'll discuss
That's your name now. Yeah, but that's a situation where the DNC is just going to continue blocking progressives, and there's honestly nothing you could do about it other than keep pushing through. Like, the whole point is, like, the left doesn't want to give in to moderate Dems because we don't want that sort of compromise or compromise to the right, which would be what compromising with moderate Dems would look like.
Discuss these and many more topics about how, and how not, to build a prosperous city. Now, since this is not just bikes, I'm going to use these topics as an opportunity to trash talk North American cities. I mean, seriously, look at how ugly this is. But hopefully, in the spirit of strong towns, I can talk about how these things can be improved too. And of course, to also serve as a warning to any cities wanting to emulate the American pattern of development. So for all of you out there too lazy to just read the damn book that Strong Towns published last year, stick around as we'll explore the ultimate guide to building strong towns. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my supporters on Patreon who pay me to summarize other people's content for fun and profit. If you'd like to support the channel, I'd like you to first...
Okay. Oh. Not what I wanted.
Non-profit organ. This video is part 2 of a series of videos on the research and writings of a US nonprofit called Strong Towns. If you haven't heard of them yet, you might want to watch part 1, but it's not strictly necessary. If you travel to cities all around the world, you'll start to see surprising similarities in the way they've been built. For centuries, cities were designed such that everyone had what they needed within walking distance. There may have been horse, rail, or streetcar connections between places, but once you got to where you were going, you could access everything you needed to on foot. Streets and public spaces were designed like an outdoor room, places that feel comfortable to be in and enjoyable to walk in. These are the kind of places Americans go to on vacation and then return home to their depressingly, soul-crushingly dystopian car-dependent suburbs. There's always a fine-grained mix of uses. A very typical configuration is commercial properties on the ground floor with apartments or offices above. Most critically, these properties are flexible. A shop might turn into a house might turn into an office. These are places that could flex and change depending on how the city evolved over time. And it's no surprise that even when you look at ancient Roman cities, the same pattern was there as well.
Pompeii.
In the late 1940s, America started on a very different path, what Strong Towns calls the suburban experiment.
This is the American dream of freedom on wheels. An automotive age, traveling on time-saving superhighways. Futurama's free-flowing channels of concrete and steel.
Instead of incremental development around existing infrastructure, huge neighborhoods were built from scratch on the edge of town. And instead of a mix of uses, residential neighborhoods were completely separated from commercial buildings, requiring a car to get between them. This probably seems normal to most people living in the US or Canada today. Since the suburban experiment began, several generations of people have grown up not knowing anything different. I certainly didn't until I moved overseas. But understand this was a drastic change from thousands of years of city evolution that we've had to date. We've now had over 70 years of the suburban experiment, and we now know that the experiment has failed. And it's not
Fucking
just because
desolate.
these suburbs are ugly, devoid of life, and soul-crushingly sterile. It goes deeper than that. Strong Towns has dozens of case studies showing why this is true, but I'll share one of their most prominent ones here. Now, Strong Towns actually explains this beautifully on their own YouTube channel, so if you'd rather hear it from them directly instead of listening to some random YouTuber, you can click on the link in the top right corner. These are two identical blocks in a small town called Brainerd in Minnesota, the hometown of Strong Towns. They are exactly the same size, they are on the same road, they are serviced by the same infrastructure that cost the city the same amount of money to maintain. They are identical in every way, except in their development style. The first one was built in the 1920s using the traditional style of development. It is a series of extremely basic structures, effectively the cheapest thing someone could build in this place in the 1920s. It's not exactly pretty, but it's functional, and it's flexible enough to meet the changing needs of the city, whether you need warehouse liquor, freedom firearms, or antiques and collectibles. But these buildings were never improved upon. Instead, after the 1940s, the city expanded rapidly outward, like every city in America, building into the suburbs instead of improving the places they already had. 2 blocks over used to look exactly the same. The city labeled it blight, which is urban planner speak for crappy and useless, and they bulldozed it. Then, a shiny new taco restaurant was opened in its place, using the modern suburban style of development. This development made everybody happy. It was a nice, new-looking building. It no longer had on-street parking, which improved traffic flow. The sign met the new code. It met the setback requirements. It even had pretty native plants and green space.
Green space. Grass that just needs tons of water.
Plus, now you can get Santa Fe burritos and bowls, pork streak tacos, flamin' hot Cheetos burritos, and even honey habanero chipotle barbecue bowl
Those
buffalo
do
wing
sound good right
sensations.
now.
Furthermore, local guide Cynthia Endress said the lettuce didn't even taste funny. Why would the lettuce taste funny, Cynthia? Is this a common problem in Brainerd? This is literally the American dream. But nobody looked at the financial impact. That first block, the old, ugly 1920s era mismatched buildings, had a total taxable value of $1.1 million. The taco shop, on
Hot
the
chip
same
and a
size
lie.
lot, with the same amount of public infrastructure spending, had a total taxable value of $800,000.
Hold on, did it say Pokemon Go to the polls on the sign? Did I miss that? That's pretty fucking hilarious. Oh. Got me excited.
This is literally the American dream. But nobody looked
That looks fucking good right now. I'm hungry.
at the financial impact. That first block, the old, ugly 1920s era mismatched buildings, had a total taxable value of $1.1 million. The taco shop, on the same size lot, with the same amount of public infrastructure spending, had a total taxable value of $800,000. Think about this for a second. That old, decrepit 1920s block brings over 40% more tax revenue for the city, and that's after over 90 years of neglect. Meanwhile, that taco shop is new, and it will literally never get more valuable than it is right now.
it's only downhill from here. This brings us to a harsh reality. Suburban-style development, even at the beginning of its life, cannot outperform traditional development at the end of its life. Strong Towns has many other examples as well, such as this 19-acre double big box store development compared to 19 acres downtown. Despite the fact that the downtown is old and most of the upper floors are empty, it still brings in almost 80% more tax revenue than the big box store in the suburbs. If you'd like to read more, I'll link to some content by Strong Towns in the description. We do developments like this all the time in the US and Canada. We're
Got
building
some cord
car-centric
management I
developments
need to
often
take
at
care
the
of.
edge of our cities and letting our productive traditional buildings rot away. But here's where we get back to flexibility. What happens when a big box retailer moves or goes out of business? We see the
Then there's a fucking huge ass fucking building that just sits there with a huge ass parking lot. It's just like fucking absorbing heat that goes fucking unused for years until it becomes like a restaurant that goes out of business in 2 years. There is a fucking Circuit City that Circuit City and something else that both went out forever. The something else finally opened into like a Longhorn Steakhouse like in the past 5 years. And, you know, Circuit City went out of business, what, in 2008? So there's at least a fucking decade that the thing was fucking sitting there unused. And I'm pretty sure the Circuit City portion of that, like, you know, 2-lot big box structure, I think that's still unused. Hilarious, this is Stephen Barry's, which was another store that went out.
results of this all over America and Canada, especially in the case of Walmart, who typically only occupy their buildings for 15 years. The big box retailer moves on, and the city is left with a giant empty site. Meanwhile, there are hundreds of different tenants in a typical downtown. What happens when one of them...
It's crazy to me just like the interconnectivity of like all these policy choices. And how like there is absolutely, especially in the legal field, no idea of like central planning or positively creating like a systems law.
goes out of business. Literally nothing. A small shop might stay vacant for a while, but the area is flexible. A retail store could become a coffee shop. An office could become an apartment. A liquor store could become a cannabis dispensary. But in any case, there is almost no scenario where all of these businesses disappear at once. To add to this problem, commercial properties are supposed to be the moneymaker. Suburban houses are even worse, but I'll talk about that in more detail in a future video. The American suburban experiment is trading a centuries-proven development pattern and replacing it with something that is not only financially unproductive, but also extremely fragile. On this channel, I don't hide the fact that I love walkable places. I believe they are more enjoyable to be in, they're more efficient, they lead to a better quality of life for the people who live in them. But I now know that car-centric suburbia is not just sucking the soul out of its inhabitants, it's making them poorer as well. In the next episode in this series, I'll talk about how these financially insolvent suburban places have propped themselves up for so long, and what that means for the future of North American cities. I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon who pay...
Next.
Welcome to the third video in my Strong Towns series. If you have no idea what Strong Towns is about, you might want to watch the first 2 videos, but it's not strictly necessary. American cities are famous for car-dependent sprawl. That's probably one of the first things most people associate with America after apple pie, baseball, and driving in soul-crushing traffic. But this wasn't always the case.
All terrible
American
things.
cities don't have to be sprawling just because the country itself is big. And up until the Second World War, they weren't. They were just as compact as cities found almost anywhere else.
But after the 1940s, America started on a totally different pattern of development and began their great suburban experiment. But herein lies the problem, because this American pattern of development builds places that do not financially support themselves. And the only reason they're still there is because American cities are a Ponzi scheme. If you don't know what a Ponzi scheme is, there are many videos on YouTube, but the very quick explanation is as follows. A scammer offers an imaginary investment opportunity, offering a huge return on investment. Investor A comes along and invests. Now, the scammer doesn't actually have the money to pay Investor A if he wants his money out, so he takes on another Investor B. He uses the money from Investor B to pay Investor A, pocketing a little for himself, of course. But how does he pay Investor B? Easy. He just brings on investors C, D, E, and so on. This works out great for our scammer, but the moment that growth stops, he has a very big problem. In the end, all Ponzi schemes fail. It's just a matter of when. One of the key insights of strong towns is that the way that US and Canadian cities have been built since World War II follows exactly this model. American-style suburbia is dependent on growth to stay financially solvent. The moment these cities stop growing, because of a financial crisis, a radical change in the job market, or any one of a number of other factors, everything starts to fall apart. Strong Towns calls this the growth Ponzi scheme. Now, unlike financial fraud, the generation who started this process didn't do it intentionally. After World War II, America was a prosperous country, and with low-cost automobiles available, it seemed possible that every American could own their own house, on their own piece of land, and the American dream was born. This became so central to American psychology that the idea that suburban development provides prosperity is taken as fact by almost everyone in the country, and the same goes for Canada too. Part of the problem is how suburban growth is financed. When the suburbs began, huge amounts of money from federal and state governments were given to cities to build out their suburbs. This still goes on today. For example, when a city wants to build a new road or freeway, usually less than a quarter of the funding comes from the city itself. The overwhelming majority comes from the Department of Transportation and other higher levels of government. So cities don't have to pay very much to build new infrastructure, but they do get a big influx of tax revenue.
He died April 14th.
From the new developments that spring up. This brings us to the first problem. It encourages cities to build lots of new developments, even if they don't make any financial sense. Of course, all this new cheap infrastructure comes with a very important catch. The city may get it built for cheap, but the city is ultimately responsible for paying to maintain that infrastructure forever. On the surface, this is fine. Governments want to invest in their cities because they are the engines of economic growth. And for the city, this should be fine too. They collect taxes from the new developments that spring up around that infrastructure, and those taxes go towards future maintenance. The big problem begins if there isn't enough tax revenue collected to cover the replacement cost of the infrastructure. And that is exactly what has happened with car-dependent suburbia, because car-centric sprawl is horrendously expensive. To explain this problem further, I'll use the example of a, quote, ideal development that is often used as an example by strong towns. Imagine a new suburban housing development on the edge of town. In this case, the developer completely pays for the street and turns it over to the city for maintenance. The residents move in and start paying tax revenue. This couldn't get any better for the suburban municipality. Free development, free road, a bunch of new tax revenue. This is awesome. Now, the municipality in this case would put a little bit of money aside for the maintenance of that road. So what would this look like in an American suburb? Well, at first, streets don't need a lot of maintenance. They may require some minor repairs such as filling cracks, but in general, new streets are pretty cheap. So the suburban city's cash flow looks something like this. Everything looks pretty great until the end of the street's life cycle, because eventually all streets and roads need resurfacing. So suddenly, the graph goes like this. If the city were just this one street, it would already be bankrupt. But
why are we waiting 25 years to repave streets? Pretty absurd.
Cities aren't just one street. They're made up of hundreds of streets and individual developments. So assuming a new development every other year, a real growing city's cash flow would look something like this, with new developments covering the cost of past developments. As you can see, growth covers the problem, and the city is financially solvent again. Yay, this is great! Let's build more! Lots of asphalt and free parking for everyone! But when you get a couple of generations into the suburban experiment, the maintenance obligations of the past start to catch up with you. Suddenly, your suburb's finances start to look something like this. Because when you lose money on every development, you don't make it up in volume. Now, it's important to note that this is an ideal case, as this model assumes near constant growth. In reality, cities have phases of growth and phases of decline, and this situation is made even worse because these growing infrastructure liabilities tend to show up just as a period of growth is over. Many Americans like to brush this off by claiming that cities do actually collect enough tax revenue, but it's all lost to corruption or inefficiencies or unions or whatever. But the reality is that most American suburbs collect only a fraction of the tax revenue required to actually finance their sprawling infrastructure. Strong Towns has several case studies about this, such as this example of a suburban road that needed resurfacing. In order for the residents to cover just the cost of their own road, the city would need an immediate 46% increase in property tax. And there are so many other costs to a city beyond just roads, such as sewer and water systems, sidewalks, treatment systems, pumps, water towers, stormwater ponds, as well as all the operational costs of running a city, such as police or fire departments. You can't just brush this off by waving your hands in the air and saying,
Efficiencies.
Worst case scenario, have no problem with parking taxes?
No, efficiency.
I'll link to this and other cases by Strong Towns in the description. And Canada is not much better. An analysis done by the Halifax Regional Municipality found that the cost to maintain and service an urban home are well less than half that of a suburban home. But in most North American cities, the suburban home pays less property tax. This leads to an effective subsidy for car-dependent suburbia. Now, don't get me wrong, our cities need affordable housing. But the solution is not to subsidize the least efficient, least sustainable developments in the city. But that topic deserves a lot more explanation, so I'll talk about that in more detail in a future video. So it's clear that car-dependent suburbs are not financially sustainable. The amount of tax revenue collected by the suburb does not cover the replacement cost of its infrastructure. And so suburban cities become addicted to growth, any kind of growth, even second-rate taco joints, just to bring in enough tax revenue to cover their maintenance obligations. But we've had several generations of this suburban garbage, several life cycles of road, water, and sewer replacements. But somehow, suburbia is still there. So you might be asking yourself, how are car-dependent suburbs still around? Why is this still a thing? And what has kept it afloat all these years?
Because of car lobbyists.
Well, the answer is debt. Lots and lots and lots of debt. But I'll explore that in the next episode of this series on Strong Towns.
Okay. Here's the deal. We're going to continue watching this playlist another time. I don't know if I want to watch more housing stuff. I'm kind of getting bored of housing. I need to eat something. I'm becoming a cranky boy. I'm a cranky boy. So I'm gonna go eat something. But I'm gonna keep the stream running. So I'm gonna be back, and I'm gonna talk about the platform economy. And we'll watch this conversation between two law professors on the American Constitution Society, which is one of the progressive legal institutions that's supposed to kind of butt up against the Federalist Society, but it does nothing of the sort. But they have an interesting conversation with a professor that has been focusing on the antitrust implications in the platform and gig economy, so we will watch that probably on 1.25 speed. But in the meantime, I'm just gonna steal content, and you're gonna watch Hasanabi with me as I watch Hasanabi while I make myself dinner and then come back. So, that's what we're gonna do.
Politics. I do political coverage. Usually, right now, I would be doing political coverage currently, but
I don't know who this
because I have a
person with
guest
him
over.
is.
But usually, I do like for the first 3 to 4 hours, I do political coverage. Then after the political coverage, I get into like dumb shit and memes and stuff like that, cause he is a meme. So like right now, I would be sometimes I'll look at like witch talk, make fun of that.
Okay.
And then
Who
I
the
watch
fuck
Joe
is this?
Rogan, which we can do right now.
Let's do it.
Because apparently he has
He has some good guests on though. The person
Yeah,
that
of
was
course.
from North Korea was a really amazing.
That person is a psycho. Oh my god.
Why?
This is what I mean about Joe Rogan's reach. It's so damaging.
Why?
I love him. That person from
You don't
North
think
Korea.
what she's speaking about is true?
No, I think there's a lot of truth to what she's saying. I think North Korea is like terrible, okay? Terrible, terrible place. There are obviously different factors other than like the fact that it's like basically a fucking monarchy, like a theocratic monarchy that is really brutal. But she's a grifter because she takes that experience and like has done college tours for Republicans where she literally has likened
Who the
her
fuck is
education
this
she got in
person?
Columbia University to North Korea. The moment that you do that, I'm like, you're not a serious
Right.
person. You're not an honest broker.
Well,
You're a
I will
fucking
be
grifter.
right back.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm pretty sure she's like
I think it's important to get the message out about the
What?
places
About-
around it, like
about North
Mongolia
Korea?
and China.
Like you think people don't know North Korea is bad?
No, I'm saying once she got out of North Korea, it didn't stop there. There was a lot of other surrounding evils that I think was good to illuminate.
I think the greatest evil on this planet is the United States of America.
You're probably right.
I think we are pound for pound significantly worse than North Korea because North Korea couldn't even dream of destabilizing and causing. Yeah, you can sit. We can sit down. I can bring
Let's
the.
sit down.
Let's do that. Hold on. Let me see. How will I move this stuff around real quick? I'm gonna try not to. Hold on. No. He's sleeping. Don't move him. My back is like fucked up. My lower back is so fucked up.
Deadlifts?
Yeah.
Deadlifts fucked my back up too.
Yeah, it's not good. Okay, you sit on this instead of the fucking main chair.
Whatever.
I mean, I have a fucked up back. I'm a bad guest. I mean, I'm a bad host. Sorry.
You sit on the shitty.
Yeah, you sit on the shit. I mean, this is your vibe though. This is your aesthetic.
It's a nice chair.
See, I knew you would like it.
Very
Mid-century modern.
Yep.
I know. I'm looking for stuff right now.
Look at the puppy. Hi. You going to sleep?
Okay, watch out. Is the yerba mate good?
Yeah, I feel spazzy already.
Really? Do you
Feels
not drink a lot of caffeine?
I do, but every time I do it, I get stressed out, and then I keep doing it though, because I get shit done.
Hell yeah. This has become like a meme now. I just bring hot girls over and make them watch Joe Rogan. I'm just gonna keep doing that, I think.
It works. It's a good business plan.
In my series, in my series of bringing hot girls over and forcing them to watch Joe Rogan, we have Sarah McDaniels, aka Crotchy, here in the building. Okay. And today we're gonna be watching The Gatekeepers of Information, Joe Rogan's latest broadcast, talking
Is this
about.
just him talking to himself?
No, he's going to be talking to, I don't know who the fuck he's talking to.
Okay.
This is from a JRE episode 1704 with CK Chin. I have no idea who that is.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see what happens there. Someone threw an egg at Larry Elder. Okay, hold on. Let's look at that first.
Hold
That's
on.
hilarious. A flying egg narrowly missed the back of the recall candidate Larry Elder's head. He's terrible. I hate him.
Why? Does he deserve the egg?
Oh, he... I mean, I can't...
He looks like Mr. Burns. Oh, shit.
Oh shit! She just clapped the security guy in the face, dude. What a psycho. Respect. Respect. Okay, I'm gonna move in a little bit.
Okay.
So I can get a little bit closer. Okay. Also, can you bring the mini fridge that's over there up here for a second? I gotta grab a drink out of there. A beverage. Thank you. This is my little baby fridge.
It's cute.
Thank you. Ladies love it.
Mountain Dew, huh?
Yeah, you can put it back down.
Big health guy.
Oh, dude, yeah, I'm huge. I'm huge into health consciousness.
I can see that.
Offer her a drink. She's literally drinking a drink. You fucking simps. Oh my god, dude. Every time I have a girl over, it's like they lose their shit.
I love this.
They're like over the top with their respecting women shit. They're like overcorrective.
That's good though. You don't want people just disrespecting females.
You're right, but I also still think that like people going overboard and treating a woman differently than they would treat like anyone else is still coming out of a place of otherizing women, and it's still infantilizing. That's why I treat everyone equally and poorly.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Oh,
At least it's, you know, you keep it going.
I treat everyone kindly.
Treat everyone like shit. That's the message here.
Okay, we got a Witch Talk compilation coming up later
Wait,
too.
Go back to Joe. What are we doing?
We're gonna do. Oh, this is ADHD manifesting.
Debate the puppy. That's great.
She fucking swung at him too. Look at
Back
that.
to the wrist.
Don't touch me again!
That's terrible form. Yeah, she did. Okay, sorry. She did get him, but like, she didn't miss. No.
Touch me again! Don't touch him! No.
She did miss.
No, she didn't get his face. I think she got his shoulder. It was a good shoulder knock.
I hear a connection. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't beat her ass.
I'm popping him in the motherfucker nose!
There's so many people around. What'd you do?
Why are they beating this old man's ass, dude? Instead of fucking Larry Elder. Dude, these people are vicious, by the way. What's going on?
Get that servant piece of shit out of here!
Oh my god, they're trying to kick him.
What do you do?
Are you having girls on for dates so you can get chat's approval? Yeah, totally. That's what I'm doing. Instead of beating Larry Elder's ass, they just like beat one of his like security's ass, I feel like. So that's Larry Elder, the black dude in the beginning that missed the egg, that the egg missed rather. He is the #1 candidate with 26% of the vote currently, going up against Gavin Newsom. Like I said, Gavin Newsom is still beating him in the polls because like all Gavin Newsom needs to do is have more than 50% of the population vote no on the recall, which you should as well. Vote no on the recall, and then it's fine. Then he stays in office. If they vote yes, though, he's immediately gone. He's no longer the governor, and whoever has the most votes on the second docket ends up becoming the next governor of California. Because there is not a lot of momentum and not a lot of interest in this up until recently, charlatans like Larry Elder, who is a conservative talk show host. So he's basically me for boomers and for conservatives, has been able to gain a lot of momentum and is now at 26% of the vote. He is a psycho. He has like an assault charge on his ex-wife. He once famously said that there was like an accusation against him about sexual assault, and he was like, she's too ugly to sexually assault. Just look her up and you'll know what I mean.
Damn. So we don't, yeah.
She doesn't care. Is this true? Do you not care?
My eyes were glazing over a little bit, but I was listening.
Okay, let's get to fucking Joe Rogan. All right, let's get to Joe Rogan instead, because seems like you're not too into this.
No, I'm into it because I need to be aware of these things, but I also think that both of them are pretty fucked.
You think you don't like Gavin Newsom?
I think he definitely does better than that guy would, but I think that the way he handled Corona was pretty poor as well.
Why? What would you have done?
I just don't know why he lifted the mask ordinance and then kept putting it it back so many times.
I'm back. Hey, I had 3 viewers watching Hassan, so. Here's the camera. All right. So we'll jump into, this is the one I want. We'll jump into like gig economy and platform economy while I eat, and then I'll probably explain what those words mean to me, and like what I will be writing about, or hopefully we'll come up with some ideas that I could write about, or I'll solidify my ideas, whatever. Like write about an op-ed on the platform economy. Maybe I'll do some of that writing here. All right, we'll go back and find out while I eat, and then we'll come back to this then. Oh no, did he already move away?
What are you gonna do about that?
I mean, we're gonna watch it.
Isn't
and
that
we're
just
gonna...
YouTube drama? Is that a real thing that you?
I mean, it is kind of.
It'd be nice if Twitch let me like go
100%.
back 30 seconds.
I guess we should watch it. Does Joe Rogan give a shit about that stuff?
He said lawsuits incoming. Joe Rogan versus Hassan Piker versus CNN. Wait,
Britney
is he implying that Joe Rogan is going to sue me?
Why would he sue you?
Because that would be fucking hilarious, dude.
That would be amazing.
Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco.
First of all, that would imply that he has to literally acknowledge my existence, which he knows who the fuck I am, but refuses to do so. So, you know.
Joe, and a quick thing before we jump into it. Yesterday, it turns out I did a push for Craig.ai/Phil.
So it seems like they punched his security guard and they threw an egg at Larry Elder.
Attacking them, which is why I believe like tens of thousands of you weren't able to get through the application process. If you want to still head over there, it should be all fixed today. They handled it relatively quick. It was my fault. They thought I was going to be pushing Thursday. It was actually Tuesday. It happened. Yeah, you should be all good to apply and get your badass metal black card. But that said, buckle up, hit that like button, otherwise I will punch you in the throat. And let's just jump into it. And the first thing that we're going to talk about today, massive implications. From Australia's High Court could have massive implications for how news companies regulate the content they post to social media. And that's because yesterday the court said the fact that it does victim. With Mexico's Supreme Court.
Where is it, Chad? Oh, Joe Rogan. Here it is.
And in what's going to easily be one of the most divisive topics in today's show, which is crazy because we're also talking about abortion today. Let's talk about Joe Rogan. This was one of the most heavily requested stories today. So if you missed it, one of the biggest podcasters in the world last Wednesday announced that he was diagnosed with COVID-19 the Sunday before. And saying that once he found out, he threw a whole slew of medications at it, right? The whole kitchen sink. They're saying monoclonal antibodies, Z-Pack, prednisone, vitamin drips, and what has become the highlight for topic of conversation, ivermectin. And before we go further, I just want to say this is where people on both sides are getting me pissed off. I'm not saying it's an equal amount, but it's where I'm getting pissed off. When I first covered this story, I made a joke about monoclonal antibodies being the smart kid in the group project. Based off of all the good research right now, it appears that that is the thing.
Come on, get to Joe Rogan suing Hassan.
So he's right. So Joe Rogan took like a fucking cocktail, right? Basically took like prednisone, Z-Pack, zinc, vitamin C, monoclonal antibodies, which is experimental, but like FDA approved, or at least emergency authorization has existed for that. It's what the president took. And he also took ivermectin. Okay, ivermectin is what I just described to you, which is like literally horse dewormer paste. It has applications for human beings as well, but
fucking pause and Abby over here, just trying to find out how and why Joe Rogan's suing him and acknowledging his fucking existence. He's got to fucking, you know, labor on here. Come on. Not impressed, bro.
Shows it being effective as a treatment is falsified.
Is he done yet? Come on, play this.
Another problem is that a lot of people are not taking the proper ivermectin because they can't go to the doctor and be like, give me the horse dewormer ivermectin. So instead, they're trying to get it from the America's Frontline Doctors, a group of like charlatan doctors that originally pushed the also now falsified cure that you never hear about in the form of hydroxychloroquine. One of the doctors that pushed that, literally, that got recognition from the president, came out to be like some psychotic woman who believes in demon semen, who believes that like you know, women are being impregnated by demon semen, and you know, she's crazy.
Like ghost sex?
Yeah, shit like that.
Our country is incredible.
Anyway, but no one talks about that anymore. So now they've moved on to ivermectin. If you can't get it from the America's frontline doctors or whatever, you resort to going to the feed store and getting the horse dewormer, ivermectin, that is made for horses and for cattle. So many people are literally, you keep saying zinc, but it's Z-Pack. I said Z-Pack and zinc. He took zinc too. I thought zinc is like the #1 thing that these people take. Anyway, let's
to my friends on the left or vaccine supporters or however you identify, ivermectin isn't just horse paste. Yes, it is commonly known for its animal formulations that are meant to treat or prevent parasites in animals. And there has been an issue of Americans actually taking the animal formulation, which is a problem. But also, like when
Philip DeFranco is literally explaining.
last reported, I said, I hope that Joe Rogan didn't dive down the rabbit hole that he's taking the human version. There are ivermectin tablets
What happens
that are for
when
human
you
beings.
pause
They're
so
used
much?
usually in very specific scenarios, things like treating very specific parasitic worms. There are also topical versions for like rosacea and lice. But also for those who are choosing ivermectin over getting vaccinated right now, understand it is not approved by the FDA or recommended by the FDA for COVID-19. But also
FDA recommends against using it. Merck, the
Oh
pharmaceutical
my God.
manufacturer
All
that
right.
makes ivermectin, also recommends
Fucking
you
pause
don't
on
take
hobby. We're gonna move on to the gig. Maybe we'll get it.
trials trying to see if there is any way that it helps. Right, so while so many people are treating this like a black and white situation, there are shades of gray here. I still would not go out and
Oh my
recommend
God.
you take this because the FDA is not saying it yet. But then to take us back to the core of this story, if you're criticizing Joe Rogan like I have, you do your viewers and just the conversation and debate in general a disservice by just saying Joe Rogan is gobbling up horse paste without further looking into the story. Joe Rogan on his podcast yesterday even addressing how some places reporting on this, even talking about potential litigation.
Bro, do I have to sue CNN?
Oh no, do you?
They're making shit up. They keep saying I'm taking horse dewormer. I literally got it from a doctor. It's an American company.
Well, Joe went on to say that he got it from a doctor who works with the frontline COVID-19 critical
Is he gonna
care line.
pull up
So, as
the
people like
stream
Hassan
from
Piker have
yesterday?
Noted, that group is actually behind a faulty study about ivermectin that ended up being pulled by its publisher because it did not, quote, offer an
It's
objective
his tweet
nor
from
valid
yesterday.
scientific contributions regarding ivermectin as a COVID treatment. But still, Rogan then went on to slam the media
That's
for not
hilarious.
focusing on his recovery.
But what they didn't highlight is that I got better.
Yeah, you got better quickly.
They try to make it seem as if like I'm doing some wacky that's completely ineffective. And
Right.
Chat cracks
CNN
me
was
up.
saying
Just
that I'm a
is on Pogo? Is on Pogo? He said it. Is on Pogo?
Well, even then, ivermectin is like
Okay.
taking horse
We're done
dewormer for
with pause and hobby here. We're gonna go to Bad Empanada and why the gig economy sucks.
The last 5 years or so, the gig economy has taken over the world, particularly in the food delivery and taxi industries. In the blink of an eye, many job positions went from involving a direct relationship with a specific employer to being handled by intermediaries.
So one thing that people continue to kind of get wrong about this history of the gig economy. Sorry, I had to get my phone out of my pocket. One thing people get wrong about this history is this employment structure that the gig economy or like these platforms employ, of hiring people out as independent contractors rather than having a direct employment relationship isn't new to the gig economy. And I don't know if you can hear in the background, there was some reggaeton going on. This structure, or like this, what I'll call like the de-employment. No, I need a better word for that. We'll come back to it. But ever since the switch in the 70s, it started with long-haul truck drivers, actually, moving from a publicly, price regulated, wage regulated, and like union workforce in the trucking industry, that switched over to a independent contractor model. So this is a model that's been around since the 70s. and it's now you're just seeing the capitalization, uh, you know, or like the climax of it, I guess, with Uber. And just like perfecting that model.
Intermediary apps run by companies that insist that they don't actually employ people, but rather just provide a service by linking businesses and customers to the supposedly self-employed freelancers who use their apps. Workers who, according to these companies, should definitely not be legally considered their employees. This has had consequences, to say the least. These kinds of jobs already weren't always very secure, but they still, at least in countries with decent labor laws and enforcement, tended to be somewhat reliable sources of income and provide workers with protections in the event of an accident. But with the gig economy, everyone's on their own and only gets paid per gig, with the intermediary taking a hefty cut out of the value of the work they do, often resulting in them taking home even less than the legal minimum wage. And it's not even good for the businesses on the other end of the deal either. Many restaurants that use these services barely even make a profit from the delivery orders they get from apps, which is especially an issue since restaurants, especially independent ones, don't exactly tend to make huge profits in the first place. On the so-called ride-sharing side of the gig economy, things are at least pretty convenient for the consumer, since it is very useful to be able to call a car directly to your location through an app, and depending on the market, they can even be cheaper than it would be to hail a taxi. That's not exactly a good thing for the driver though. But on the food delivery side, it's much harder to find the positives. Even for the customer, everything in these apps tends to be more expensive than it would have been simply ordering directly from the restaurant, from the price of the food down to the delivery fee. You end up paying a massive premium that wouldn't have been there with a regular old phone delivery order. Remember those? Yet in a perfect demonstration of capitalist meritocracy, they've still pretty much monopolized food delivery all the same in an incredibly short time frame. If you run a restaurant and
one of the reasons that they do this is, and there's this interesting parallel to some of the affordable housing videos that we looked at, or particularly the last one, where you're just seeing a debt financing to prop up these developers, in a sense, and then those developers being favored by the law as like a big firm. And so what happens here, in the platform economy or the gig economy is all these companies are debt financed, and are able to grow. It's a harder one for the food delivery services, and that's why I think a lot of times you have to look at them as these like broader platforms. So you can look at Uber, and like the reason Uber gets these these investments is the promise that Uber will be a automated car service in the future. And so I guess with Uber Eats, then it's automated food delivery. And so Uber's kind of like hanging on that promise and getting finance by these big investors, getting hefty donations, not investments. And so they become the biggest firm, and are the way our antitrust law is set up, and that's something hopefully in one of the later videos we'll go into, and I'm still wrapping my head around and learning myself. The way our antitrust laws are set up is a way that systemically privileges larger firms rather than a diverse group of small firms with the same purpose.
and you want a piece of the delivery pie, you've got to use Uber Eats or DoorDash or the dozens of other clones around the world because that's what the customers are using. People open their app, mindlessly scroll through the options, choose something from a restaurant whose name they might even just forget the next day, and get it delivered to their door by a self-employed worker they'll probably never see again, with no one involved even deriving much benefit from this arrangement at all, aside from an eensy-teensy little bit of convenience on the customer's end. That's just how things are now.
I really could go for an empanada.
I used to work for one of these delivery apps myself back in 2016 and 2017. I had to quit my previous job because I was moving away for university. I had about 2 months worth of savings to live off, which was enough to pay for the basics like rent, food and bills, and I was sure that I'd be able to find a job within that time frame, especially since I was willing to accept literally anything. I was extremely wrong. Every single position that I applied for, from cashier to dishwasher to cleaning toilets, had hundreds upon hundreds of other applicants. This was in Melbourne, Australia, and at the time, pretty much everyone who I knew was having the exact same problem. The epitome of this ridiculousness was an interview for a shelf packer role at a major supermarket chain. I made it to the third stage of interviews. Yes, there were apparently 3 stages, and this was like a whole day event in a massive conference center. There was more than 100, maybe more than 200 other applicants there, and they like divided everyone into little groups where they did team building exercises, like something out of a primary school classroom or something, while a recruiter watched us in order to judge whether we were suitable for the role of packing shelves or being a cashier, I guess. Minimum wage shelf stacking job, 200 interviewees in an auditorium. Just imagine that, think about that. Needless to say, I apparently failed to distinguish myself from the 200 other applicants and didn't end up getting the job. It actually got to the point where I'd used up all my savings. I paid my rent, stocked up on the absolute cheapest food possible, and then just plain had no money left over for the rest of the month. Literally like not even $1. Now, when you're in that situation where you've failed to find a job for months and you're getting really desperate, the gig economy can really seem like a lifeline. And it definitely did for me. I had a bike, a phone, and an ID, and apparently that was literally all you needed to be accepted. They took anyone who just showed up with those things.
So one of the issues with the gig economy, like the platform economy, is this lack of essentially gatekeeping mechanisms into the profession or into the job. And on its face, that sounds bad. We don't like gatekeeping here. But you have to see it in context of the industries in which the delivery gig economy or the ride-sharing gig economy is coming out of. So it's coming out of the taxi industry or like the bike delivery industry. Bike delivery is a little bit of a different situation, but if you think about taxis, there were hurdles you would have to go through that could at times and were at times used to limit or exclude certain types of people. But on its face, they're used as a way to limit the number of people that could enter into the labor market. So you don't have like an oversaturation. And so what happened with Uber is like you're limited. You're no longer limiting who has access to the market because anyone with a car and a phone could drive for Uber. So while the rates may have been the same, or for a time, people may have been bringing in the same amount of money that they originally did as just a taxi driver. That was based on a price fixing by Uber where they no, I'm sorry, I'm getting the story wrong. So you you limit the access to the market as a way. So I'm not an econ person, but I'm finding it more and more important, especially as it relates to kind of my leftist view of the law, to have a better understanding of economies in the economy and the market. And this class has been kind of like pushing my boundaries, or how comfortable I am with economics in general. So I guess I'm trying to talk through my ideas and like talk through what I've learned. So if I stumble, bear with me. Is my point.
Sure sounded better than being evicted in a month. Now there's a whole point to be made here regarding what I said in the intro. These gig economy apps rely on having a steady stream of people who are so desperate for work that they'll just take anything, even if it pays less than minimum wage and offers them no benefits or protections whatsoever. They don't create new jobs at all, they just offload them to a third party in a way that's worse for everyone involved and especially for the worker. So the fact that I was unable to find other work and ended up resorting to the gig economy in order to avoid literal homelessness was actually a direct consequence of their very existence. If the gig economy wasn't a thing, then every restaurant that used their service would instead have to hire a delivery guy, meaning that there would have been many, many more real job openings available for people like me, and they also would have paid better and more securely, and the business would have been liable to actually help me out in the event of an accident. That's going to be very relevant soon. So anyway, off I went signing up for Uber Eats. I uploaded a picture of my ID, gave them my personal details, you know, all that sort of stuff. And after that, all that there was left to do was to head down to their office in person so that they could confirm my ID was real and also sell me the insulated food backpack that I needed to work for them. Yep, I had to buy from this company the gear that was needed to work for them. So I arrived at the address that they gave me, and it was like an abandoned looking warehouse in a side street. It was very clear that they were basically just renting the cheapest spaces they could find for commercial purposes. Like, there was a tiny desk in the corner with 2 people there, and the rest of it was just an empty warehouse. It took like a few minutes, and then yay, I had a job. Sorry, I didn't actually have a job. I was rather a freelance partner. So naturally, as you do when you're someone who desperately needs money, I started working right away. It was actually really hard. I was on a bike rather than like a motorcycle, so it was actually very physical. I'd quite often get deliveries that would take me like 3 or 4 kilometers away, which would pay like 10 to 12 Australian dollars each, which I think is like 6 or 7 US dollars. Now, any decent cyclist knows that 3 kilometers on its own really isn't much. Counting the time that it takes you to enter the restaurant, pick up the food, get back on your bike, you know, ride in traffic, etc. That's probably like 15 to 20 minutes maximum. The problem is that once you're done with the delivery, you're going to end up in a residential area. You're going to need to cycle back to where there's actually restaurants and wait for a new delivery. You're not paid for that part, you're only paid for the delivery. So it's actually like 6 kilometers and 40 minutes of your time. Even if you were concentrating and doing things as best as you possibly can, you would make like 15 Australian dollars an hour, which is significantly less than the minimum wage of $19. Basically the entire time frame in which you could actually get deliveries every single day for like 3 weeks straight. I was making anywhere from like 50 to 150 Australian dollars per day. It varied a whole lot based on the volume of deliveries that you got. So I was working 11-hour days for what, even on the best days, was still less than minimum wage, which would have been $209 for an 11-hour workday. Actually, no, it would have been more because of overtime. It sucked ass. I was riding my bike for like 40 kilometers every single day and basically dying. Don't get me wrong though, if I had been working for an employer, you know, with like a fixed wage, who at least had some degree of responsibility for me, it would have been okay. Tolerable at least. But as it was, it sucked. I still had to live off the absolute cheapest food imaginable, though funnily enough, I was now burning so many calories cycling every
Need
single
to eat
day
more.
that I had to start buying like double the amount of food that I did before. So that was actually another additional cost on top of everything else. But thankfully, I did at least manage to put aside enough to pay my rent after like 3 weeks of doing that. So I guess there's that. Then one day, I was in the middle of working as I had been for basically every waking hour of the last like month or so. I went off on a delivery and suddenly it just starts pouring rain, despite the fact that it was in the middle of summer, because you know, that's just how Melbourne is. Usually I would have been cautious and stopped and just let it subside, but I was in the middle of a delivery, so I didn't have that luxury. You have to deliver the food within a set time frame, otherwise you get reprimanded and you might potentially lose your job, and then whoops, you're homeless. So I keep riding and
Hey, McDonald's is fucking expensive sometimes though. They've been jacking up those prices. No more dollar menu. At least not in New York City.
and then I don't really know exactly what happened. I felt a bump in my rear tire, and the next thing I know, I was on the ground and my mouth hurt like hell. I put my hand up against it, pulled it away, took a look at it, and well, it was covered in blood and had 2 fragments of my teeth in it. Then I looked
Nice.
around and I saw some lady in a Land Rover stop beside me, looking down upon me with a guilty looking face. I tried to flag her down for help, but she drove off immediately. I'm pretty sure
That is fantastic. 2 for $3.50 here in SoCal. For what? I do have to say a 4-piece is $1.39, and that's a pretty decent deal. With the sauce too, you get a sauce. For a 6-piece, it's like $3. The jump is absurd for 2 more nuggies. Use app for deal coupons. Yeah, I just recently had like I'd been eating more McDonald's than I have in a while, and that I should. And I've had to. I'm gonna have to stop. I was fighting the urges today. But I know the prices of my local McDonald's now. And at one point, it was absurd. The double cheeseburger was less expensive than the McDouble. 2 for $3, either McChicken, 6-piece, or a cheeseburger. It's a pretty good deal. I'm a McChicken fan. I've been getting the spicy chicken sandwich with the pickle on the like brioche bun. It's pretty damn good. That and a plain triple cheeseburger, medium fries, and a 4-piece was my like go-to order. And I'm a buffalo sauce, you know, like their buffalo dipping sauce. And I'd fucking dip everything in it. It's so fucking good. Though not as good as the Burger King zesty sauce. Honestly, I can make a stream that's just talking about fast food, like niche fast food topics, or like prices, or what's the best McDonald's order. Burger King has a very good spicy chicken sandwich as well. Highly suggest. They do a good one. Very good piece of chicken. Yeah, the spicy buffalo is the best sauce ever. But like I said, I do like the zesty sauce from Burger King. I gotta talk to some of my buddies that stream, because I'm sure we could just do like a night where we sit here for like 2 hours just talking about different fast food. I'm literally gonna suggest that to them. There's an older episode of Chapo from like the before times. Actually, it may even no, it was a Chapo episode. I forget who they had as their guest, but Cressman was just going like down rabbit holes of different fast food chains and like their specialties and pros and cons against them. I stand by him that Arby's is underrated.
that she hit me, but I don't know for sure because no one else was around to confirm it. Thankfully though, like 30 seconds later, I did manage to get some help. Our family in a car stopped and helped me out. and some of the people who live nearby came out of their house and let me lie down on their porch while they called the ambulance and stuff, which was really nice of them. They helped me to gather my things too, which were strewn out all over the road. Somehow my phone didn't break, which was cool, and my bike was fine too, which was also cool. And I gotta tell you that I am 99% sure that I probably would have died or at least been seriously injured if I wasn't wearing a helmet. So yeah, if you cycle, I suggest that
Always wear your helmet.
you wear one. But in those
The scar for my and hence the bike repairs goal. Thankfully I didn't really hit my head, but I did have a helmet on. There was a little scuff on the helmet, but most of it I took on my shoulder. I crashed my bike. Always wear your fucking helmet. You got too much to fucking lose. I got too much invested in this fucking noggin to not wear a goddamn helmet.
moments with my teeth literally in my hand, with my upper lip split.
Those saying that, like, just going down the street, well, I haven't been able to do it because, again, bike is kaput at the moment, but going down the street to, like, go get my hair cut or something, a few blocks, might not wear the helmet, but if you're going to be, like, delivering, wear your fucking helmet.
Split open, bleeding everywhere, while I was in intense pain. I wasn't thinking about, like, my injuries. I wasn't thinking about my immediate circumstances. I was thinking, oh man, oh crap, I'm gonna miss this delivery, and then I'm gonna get fired, and then I'm not gonna be able to pay my rent, and I'm gonna be homeless, and I'm not gonna be able to eat, and I'm gonna starve to death. Oh my god! I was in.
So, I had a situation, similar-ish situation, not with me delivering, me being on the other end of ordering something, and someone, the driver got into a car accident, and, like, called me and was, like, very worried, just as Bad Empanada here was, expressing his worry, and I was like, my dude, don't worry about it. I will just fucking call Seamless and yell at them and get my, tell them that you called and did everything, but put it on them to give me, like, a fucking refund. But the dude, like, got into a pretty bad car accident and fucking, was still worried about the order.
In such a precarious situation overall that my immediate circumstances, where I had just sustained like a gory ass injury, really barely even registered for me. In this delirium, I even asked the people who were helping me if they could please deliver this delivery for me and finish it so that I didn't get fired. I was the wage cuck supreme in that moment. It got worse when the ambulance arrived. I refused to get in until the paramedics assured me that it would be free, because luckily I apparently qualified for a low income fee waiver. So I hopped into the ambulance and they managed to bandage me up a little bit and stuff.
Imagine, like, this is in Australia. In America, you don't have that fucking option. You're paying for that shit. Even if you have insurance, you're paying a fucking hefty fee to go in a fucking ambulance. Don't take the ambulance unless you need to. Sometimes it's actually cheaper. I fucking took an Uber to the urgent care when I fucked up my arm. Like, and obviously that's not an emergency room. Stitches are, not an emergency room necessity, but fucking take a ambulance. Fuck that.
Stop most of the bleeding. After that, I took a selfie and I'm about to show it. So if you don't want to see someone with broken teeth and a split lip, I suggest that you look away for about 5 seconds now.
I don't know if... Does he show it?
So yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, there it is. Pretty bad. In
That's
the
not bad.
ambulance, literally on the way to the hospital, I was still primarily worried about my job. The first person who I called was a friend who I asked to please go to the crash site and retrieve my backpack and deliver the food so that I don't get fired. Needless to say, he politely refused. So then I immediately shot an email off to Uber Eats support explaining that, please sir, Mr. Uber, please don't fire me. It's not my fault.
Please, Mr. Overlords. Don't take away my livelihood and my ability to survive. Because the infrastructure caused me to crash on my bike and or some fucking rich lady in her Land Rover hit me. Like, imagine having to do that to fucking, our corporate overlords. It's a fucked up society that we live in, that we literally like have to beg. And I guarantee his, the moral of his story is they didn't fucking care. Said you didn't deliver, you're getting docked.
Told I had an accident. Please, sir, allow me the privilege of working for you still. Please, I don't want to be homeless. I have the receipts right here. I had an accident on delivery today. I'm currently in the hospital. While in the ambulance, I got a bunch of delivery requests that I had to decline before I was able to go offline. Could I please be forgiven for these, as my percentage of acceptance is now below 85%. 85% acceptance was the threshold where you would get banned from the app, I believe. And guess what? Uber never responded to that email, or at least I never received it. Then the cherry on top of it all. Apparently the customer had complained that their delivery was late, so Uber called me to ask, what was going on. I said to the support person that I was currently literally in the ambulance, that I had an accident, and I asked if there was anything that they could do to help me. And they hung up immediately, literally right as I finished that last sentence. And honestly, I wouldn't have expected anything less from these companies. They specifically want expendable workers who they don't have to take any responsibility for. So anyway, I was dropped off in the ER of a hospital where luckily there was an attending doctor who had emergency dental training. She stitched up my lip and applied dental film to the broken teeth to make sure that the nerve wasn't exposed. Luckily for me, that part was all covered by Australia's public health insurance, or I would have been fucked. I went home after about 2 or 3 hours there, and then the next morning, I immediately put myself to trying to figure out how to get my teeth fixed and how to get my lip fixed up a bit better. Like in most countries that I know of, dental care in Australia is unfortunately not covered by public health insurance. But nonetheless, I showed up to the emergency room of a public dental hospital and I found that hip hip hooray, because I'm so poor, I qualified for a huge subsidy. I only had to pay about $25 per visit. That was pretty cool, because otherwise I would have been totally fucked. But still, the government ended up paying for my medical treatment when normally it would have been the employer's insurance that had to. So taxpayer dollars ended up subsidizing these companies' awful business practices. But hey, that's the gig economy for ya. It's all well and good not having any cover from your employer until the day that you actually need it. Regardless of that huge problem though, after the accident, I still had to keep working. I needed the money even more than I did before because now I had to pay $25 per dentist visit and I was going to the dentist 2 to 3 times per month. So that was an extra expense of $50 to $100 per month I didn't have to pay before. So even after this trauma on the job, Uber Eats still had me by the balls, just totally. And literally 2 days later, I was already back on my bike and working for them. This wasn't exactly a political awakening moment for me or anything though. I knew all of this about these gig economy apps before I even went in. But even with all that knowledge, it's still not like I could have said no. It was that or not pay my rent and not eat food. Or I guess I could have kept hoping that I get chosen from the hundreds upon hundreds of applicants for every single job opening, which didn't seem very likely to be honest. My reaction here, where I was more worried about my ability to pay to fulfill my basic needs than an
Okay, bad empanada. What else you got for me?
much deeper trouble than just missing half of my 2 front is pretty much just one gigantic loophole designed to get around every single labor law ever. That's why these companies are happy to...
It was a very basic overview. Honestly, I'm getting worn out. I think I'm gonna end it there. And the next time that I stream, we will pick up on some more gig economy, platform economy, videos and analysis. Thank you everyone who has stopped by. Thank you DFKGF for the follow. Thank you Tony Dad of Quattro for sticking around and watching some Hassan with me. I will catch you all